Good morning and welcome to season 3 of Career Launch Live. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and we are so very excited to be back for season 3. I have a killer lineup of guests and topics this season, including we're going to have 2 different episodes dedicated to hilarious things that happen in HR and recruiting. But as you know, we're also going to have the great content about anything people in the workplace. That is what we're here to talk about. And today, I would also like to say that we have a wonderful sponsor. And as you may know, if you've watched the show before, none of our sponsors pay for sponsorship. These are products and or services that we really, truly believe in. And so our sponsor for this month is Therapy with a Wag. And what this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to have a therapy dog and licensed mental health practitioner come to your office and visit, elevate spirits. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. They also do individual counseling in the state of Texas. So without further ado, today we're going to be talking about why don't ask, don't tell is a general policy, not just about sexuality, does not work in the workplace. And for that, I have an incredible guest, somebody that I have actually worked with in a professional setting, which not all of my guests are, but so it's kind of cool to have somebody that I've worked with in that capacity. I'd like to go ahead and bring on Mr. Sidney Ware. Good morning.
Hello, how you doing today?
I'm good, and it's super early for you, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh yeah, no problem. To think, there was a time, and the time being like the last, I don't know, 10 years of my life, where I just figured 7 a.m. is just a time for students that they tell you at home scare the children to
Right.
keep them up. That 7 a.m. is real.
That's right. It's not really though. We just pretend that it's not there. Whenever the only time I really see earlier than 7 is when I'm flying. And like sometimes I'll have to leave the house by 3:45 a.m. So that's kind of the only time that I'm a super morning person. Other than that, I just, even after I wake up, I try to pretend that mornings don't exist. I'm not going to lie. Like I kind of just try to skip over them altogether.
Oh yeah, you folks out there that are up there at like 6 in the morning saying, yes, I think I'll go to the gym and go for a run. You're stronger than I, my friends.
Yes, that is my husband, and he's a marvel to me. He really is. And good morning to everyone who's saying good morning to us. So tell us a little bit, before we dive in, Sydney, tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
Oh, sure. So I don't know why I was totally unprepared to talk about this kind of thing. Well, way too humble. Right. So I pride myself as an HR leader that specifically specializes in putting a compassionate and people first approach to what I apply doing professionally, specifically because it's very, very easy to basically not be people first. While, HR does kind of lean towards kind of compassionate people over the years, that kind of thing can sort of wax and wane a little bit to where
Yes.
You can kind of become the workplace Grim Reaper a little bit, where it's
HR, the workplace Grim Reapers. I like it.
But I try to make sure that I'm not that, and that I provide a compassionate voice, because broadly speaking, I like to think that employees are your most important asset. So you need to invest in them and make sure that they're happy and healthy, because even if you put aside the woo-woo, be a good person, it results in the folks you're working with working harder and being more invested in.
Yes. Psychology Today even published a study talking about how when people are allowed to work in a way that's natural and healthy to them, and that encompassed many things, that production went up, employee satisfaction went up, their health was better, their overall actual physical health tended to be better. So it's really important to take care of your humans. And that's why we are here, is to help you be even better at taking care of your humans. And by the way, folks, we will respond to your comments. So if you have anything to say, any questions, if you just disagree with us, drop it in the comments and we'll talk about it. So my first kind of question for you, so we're going to talk about why don't ask, don't tell doesn't work. And as HR folks, we hear a lot of well, why do we need to talk about this? Whether it's about race or sexuality, the reversal of Roe v. Wade, there's a lot of confusion as to why that that should be talked about at all. Health, whether it's ADA related health conditions, all of that. We get a lot of, well, why do we even need to talk about it? What is your response as to why it matters to sometimes talk about this?
There are a number of different ways that one could go about this one, but the one that the speaking path I'll sort of go down is people are not robots. They bring their whole experience into the workplace with them. There's no such thing as separating the personal from the business. You can try, but that's not going to be the case. You know how, like, when people have family emergencies or something like that, they may have to call out sick one day because they're just not in a great spot to work. That's a great example of people cannot separate themselves from, business life. People bring everything that they are into the workplace, including their personal identities. And that kind of thing becomes very important when, and we'll get to this a little bit more in a second, when we start discussing specific marginalized aspects of people's identity, because you don't stop being trans when you come into work. You don't stop being Black when you come into work, and for that matter, you don't stop.
Really? You don't just wait. You can't just spontaneously become white when you go to work, Sydney. Like, what's with that?
I can't. Unfortunately, I can't.
Have you even tried? Have you even tried? No. Okay. I'm just kidding. By the way, I'm not advocating for pretending to be something that you're not. I just want to make that very clear.
The pro strat. Here's your pro HR tip for the day. Don't show up to work in whiteface. I don't.
Oh God, yeah. Please don't do that. That would be so bad. So bad. Not well received. I actually recently watched the Key and Peele where they were wearing whiteface, and I was just rolling because I'm like, oh my God, if someone actually did this, like, just the nightmare that would ensue. But it was priceless when they did it. But it's very true. You don't change. Like, I am not just suddenly not bipolar when I work, and I'm not just suddenly not a woman, or female, or how, whatever term you want to use. That just doesn't happen. Like, these things, I just suddenly don't have MCAS, which is a condition that causes all kinds of weird reactions in your body. But these things do occur. And that's why you do, to a certain extent, need to have a conversation. But I want to be very clear. We're not saying that you should walk up to somebody and go, hey, how's your disability today? Or, hey, how is it being Black today? Like, when I don't, how do you, and my all-time favorite, because this actually happened. This is a true story that happened in Catherine's life. Do not ever, for any reason, walk up to a coworker, your employee, or anybody else that is a Black person and say, how did you get your hair like that? I'm just amazed at how you people can get your hair to do. That's exactly what you said, get your hair to do. And I'm like,
get your hair to
and I was standing, I was like, I don't even, first of all, the grammar with that, like, let's unpack that situation.
There's a lot to go into there, and like, probably a really nice segue into, there's a certain level of assuming certain defaults about people, or contextualizing the larger workplace as having a default flavor, and everything else on top of that is extra. That's I think that's the fundamental, well, outside of don't be a horrible person, but
don't be shitty.
In a pragmatic sense, that's where don't ask, don't tell in any regards begins to fall apart. Because let's say you apply don't ask, don't tell. Okay, so let's say, hey, what'd you do the other day? Well, I was watching this movie called Beauty and the Beast. Oh, really? What happened? Well, there was a girl and a beast, and I can't talk about the rest because that would be talking about heterosexuality. See, that, you see why doesn't that work?
That was a beautiful illustration. That's why it doesn't work. We're not saying that you have to bring it up just randomly. That's weird. Don't do that. Um, but but there's a problem because people should get to talk about their lives at work. And they do. They're humans. Again, back to they're human beings, not robots. It's going to come up. They're going to talk about their kids. They're going to talk about their loved ones. They might talk about their health a little bit. Also, if they need something, they need to be comfortable and know that it's okay. So if they need an accommodation, if they need time off, if a woman, I just saw a post about this, that women feel like they can't ask to pump while they're at work. Folks, they can't help that. It is a biological need. Like, you're going to have to address this. And that's talking about motherhood and about femininity and our bodies and what's going on. You have to be able to have a basic conversation. Now, where do you think the line is of, okay, this is what you should be talking about at work and all this, and even from the employee standpoint, this is what you should be talking about versus, okay, like, here's the line. We are at work. Maybe don't bring these things up.
So I'll more or less tell you the exact same thing that I tend to tell people when doing harassment training is the rule of thumb I like to go down is the I don't know you like that test. So when you say something and could this other person reasonably reply with, "Ooh, I don't know you like that. Ooh, I wish you wouldn't have talked about that. I
Right.
Because, like, hey, there are some coworkers that you know quite well, that you know outside of work. You may know their family, you may know their friends, you may see them outside of work regularly. They may be someone you've worked with for several years, and you have that type of functional relationship, and that's fine. But say there's another coworker that, like, you just met yesterday. There are probably some things that you can't really discuss too much about them, but there are some things that you can't really discuss, but I think there is a sort of core underpinning of what is in the acceptable range of human experience that also is inclusive to marginalized people as well.
Right. Like, you can talk about, for instance, I would say, talk about your partner in the general sense of, like, oh, my husband, wife, whatever you want to call them, and I went out this past weekend, we did XYZ. What you don't want to say is, we had this really great sex, and here's all the positions that we did.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I was trying to work around, like, ooh, I want to keep it PG. Can I go up to PG-13? Okay,
go up to PG-13. Just go with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is a sort of default expectation, especially for queer people, where like, I myself is just a bisexual person, like, hey, I talk about your partner in a general sense when there's a sort of underlying expectation of that being somehow by default sexualized, when that's not necessarily the case at all. Hey, we want to, I mean, for some people, this is still the present, but if we want to take a step back to the year 2006, give or take, where if you mention the word gay, they're going to start making really inappropriate jokes about, like, having sex or something like that, right? When, if you are a gay person, you may just not want to discuss it at all. You just want to discuss, yeah, me and my partner made a nice pie the other day, or we went out apple picking or something.
I want to make pie.
There's nothing that you can do that as a straight couple as well, but one of them happens to be the gay version of that.
Right. And it doesn't matter. Like, there's, like, relationship basics are the same with everybody. I just want to throw that out there. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people and a lot of walks of life. Relationship basics are the same. So, like, you're going to talk about things your kids do, things that you do together on the weekend, how your partner gets on your nerves might come up, maybe don't dive into that too much at work. That's also kind of weird, but these things matter. When it comes to race, there are some things that it might be appropriate to bring up, or that you might just, in casual conversation, talk about something that kind of skims along, discussing race. That's okay. That can come up. That's fine. But don't maybe don't, start a protest in the middle of work for something that's not work related.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like, I think for various flavors of marginalized people, it's okay to talk about how we are in kind of precedented, depending on in our general lifespans for the bulk of us, in unprecedented times of rolling back various flavors of civil rights.
right.
I think it's okay to talk about that. That's probably fine. That seems pretty acceptable. That seems to be a partially universal experience to some degree. Like, hey, I noticed that exactly 52-ish% of the population just lost a certain right to have an
Right. To
abortion.
healthcare.
Like, and I think there is this tendency to characterize systemic problems as a personal issue when that's not necessarily the case. That's an issue that, like, we as a people are collectively experiencing, and there's no point in really
And I want to
individualizing
hit on that. Yeah,
experience.
I want to hit on that because this applied when all the Black Lives Matter stuff and the George Floyd stuff happened. This applies when Roe v. Wade was reversed, and there's been some other things like that recently, and also historically. Sometimes when an issue is big enough as a society, even if it is kind of political, you are going to have to address it as a company. That's just it. You're going to have to, if you're smart anyway. If you're smart, you address it. If not, you don't address it and you don't give a safe space, things can get really bad really quick. And you leave room for it to become one-on-one, like argumentative sessions and things like that versus a general, we support this, we do this. So I had a lot of people ask me when Roe v. Wade was reversed, why should I have a policy about this? Why should I address it? And I said, well, number one, it's a stress point for a lot, not just the women, men too. I know some men that had some very strong reactions to that, and for their own very personal reasons that I won't get into. But then there's also the fact that there's a practical element for women too of basic healthcare, because all of a sudden things that actually did start happening, these are actual scenarios that I am very well aware of, is that doctors for a while, it's kind of petered out now, they didn't know if they could perform life-saving procedures, that because they didn't know if they were going to lose their license, they didn't know what the deal was. So there was like a delay for hours and hours of, can we do that, even do this? And so that was very stressful for a lot of people, and just kind of the up in the air. We don't even understand what's going on, and all these different states are doing different things, and it's very confusing. It's very scary. Sometimes you have to let people tap into that emotion and kind of help weather and become the calm in the storm. I know you have some experience with that, so share with us a little bit your experience dealing with this.
Sure. So okay. So I'm guessing because this is about HR, this conversation is going to skew a little bit older. So most of you remember 9/11, and you can probably already see where I'm going with this. Let's all flash back and also assume I was an adult because I would have been like 9. Okay.
I was closer to adulthood.
Let's all assume we were all adults. Something horrible has happened. No, actually, I'll make it even easier for you. Let's all turn back the clock to 2020. COVID's popping off. It's having a great time, I guess. Not for us, the human race, the COVID virus, I mean. And then I walk into work one day because mask mandates haven't happened yet, and I'm wearing a mask, and someone pulls me over and says, hey, don't talk about that COVID thing. That's getting a little political. I don't think we can avoid this.
No, you have to talk about it as a company.
This is just happening now. This is just what is happening in real life. And just from a cold, pragmatic standpoint, when you give people that space, while it is funny to laugh at corporate virtue signaling, there still is a certain net positive going on there, in that if you don't acknowledge that you live in the real world, then your employees won't think that you know that they live in the real world as well.
Right.
People do notice when, like, hey, George Floyd has been killed by the police. Your single black employee looks up and says, man, it's kind of weird how I'm like the only black person here. You probably want to like address maybe some systemic bias going on here, even
Yeah.
if like you, the hiring manager, like aren't actively saying, oh yeah, if they don't pass the paper brown test and I don't want them here, there still is something going on here that
Something.
may contribute to that kind of bias. And what you don't want is to have that kind of thing go totally unaddressed, and you're basically holding up, system of racism and that by and large holds back black and brown people. But you also don't want to have, hey, Ted from accounting, the one black person that works here, let's have a sit down about race today. And they're literally the only black person here, and they have nothing to do with anything involving that. And now they're in the unfortunate situation of being put on a pedestal about this.
Yeah, don't make it weird for your employees. Don't do that. And don't assume that somebody wants to be the voice for a community. I mean, you could ask them, I guess. Like you could say, hey, we want to start this program, this employee resource group or whatever. Would you like to be part of it? But invite everybody. Don't just like target one human. That's kind of weird. And be, I see a lot of one of the things I've been seeing a lot. In fact, I just did a post about this. I've seen this so much lately. Are companies very specifically doing things that they think are inclusive or quote woke that are so counterproductive and actually very insulting? So one of the biggest things are all of these questions being added to the collection of EEOC and ADA information in an application. And so instead of just, what's your gender, general, do you have a disability, which by the way, you don't really need to collect any of that information anyway, but that's a whole other show. In most cases, you don't. Now they're specifically asking, what is your sexuality? I literally saw this one the other day. What is your disability? Ew! No! No, 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 no. That is not good. Please don't do that. Somebody else's diagnosis is not your business. Who they sleep with is not your business unless they choose to make it your business and tell you about it. But please don't do that. So you need to put in the effort, and you need to have the conversations, and you need to have listening sessions, and you need to address things when you kind of go, okay, wait a minute, and I had this happen not long ago. I had to address it with the client. Why is everyone moving to stage 2 a white man? That literally happened to me. I'm not saying that, that happens all the time, but that literally happened to me not long ago. I had another one where everybody had to be extremely good looking, which being unattractive is not a protected group, but it's still weird. Like, okay, we should probably still address this.
Like when you start saying like attractive, then you start getting into beauty standards, and then you start getting into, oh, curious how everyone who works here is like a very particular, like thin body type, like chiseled abs, like white person. Curious.
Yeah, this is getting a little weird. A little, master racy, that it's a little bizarre, and I don't like it.
Exactly. Even if you're thinking, no, I just mean that in like the neutral, anybody could be good looking. Well, okay, sure, but when you like start getting into the weeds of things, then you start getting into things like, hey, in order to like have those giant chiseled abs, you need things like really good access to food, exposable income to go to the gym, etc. And then that starts to slowly filter into like a very particular, and some people just may be outright colorist, where they may not necessarily say no black people, but they may go only light-skinned black people because of beauty standards or something like that.
And things like that. Yeah. So you have to be very careful with these kinds of things, and always check your biases. If you just notice too much of something getting through, something is wrong. You need to fix it. It may not be intentional. A lot of times it's subconscious. I've told this story on a few episodes of not only my show, but others, where I went through a thing where I didn't like Mallory's. I had 2 Mallory's candidates, people named Mallory, screw me over. And so I just didn't like Mallory's for a while. And I needed to check that. That's not fair to other Mallory's. So even when it's something silly or something that is based on something that just happened to you, you still need to check it. You still need to fix it. It's still not acceptable. So you have to constantly grow that and constantly work on yourself and
Yeah,
your company.
hey, I'm going to throw one that I feel like a lot of you out there are probably not going to like too much. That also applies to things like education as well. Because hey,
Yes.
if you are looking at candidates that only have 4-year degrees, if I went on a college campus right now, who has 4-year degrees? Like, would I see a colorful conclave of every group possible? No, I'd mostly see upper middle class white people. So I'm not saying that a college degree doesn't have value, and I'm also not saying that there aren't people of color that go to college, but I am saying that there is a natural filtering process that does lend itself specifically to upper middle class white people
Yeah.
that
And
may not be actively saying, but it is happening.
well, and even without the racial element, which is definitely a factor, it's also the socioeconomic discrimination of a 4-year college degree. Also, it can leap into disability discrimination because some people struggle in college because the college won't let them have accommodations. Also, another one that is another reason not to require 4-year degrees is that in 99% of jobs, you don't need them.
Yeah, and shows a certain mark of pride, of follow through, and yada yada yada. That's fine because it does show that to some degree. But I do think it is very important to have other tools at your disposal to be able to identify candidate skills. For
Yes.
example, a friend of mine who's a senior engineer, while he does like it when candidates do have a 4-year degree, if they don't have something at your disposal that you can call upon to have a sort of
Right.
test ability.
And that's fine. Yeah, I like the job descriptions that say or, it's a degree or an extra number of years of experience or whatever it is. That's fine. That's good. But and be inclusive and stop requiring. One of the things that really gets me is good communication skills. Well, first of all, what does that mean to you? Because when I say that, I just mean that you have a comprehension of the language and you can communicate to me in some form or fashion what works for you. Other people will mean you don't need an accommodation, will mean you don't have an accent, will mean these types of things. So don't put that kind of thing in your job description. It's gross and it's discriminatory, even if you don't mean it that way. You may mean it how I mean it, but just don't put it in there. But you don't need to anyway. We all know you need somebody that you can understand what they're saying to you. That's common
I don't really
sense.
know how many jobs out there are. Oh yeah, you don't need to communicate at all. I just need you to show up and be a scarecrow, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't need it. Like, there's no typing, there's no talking, no hand signals that are no ALS or anything like that. Nope. Just sit there and do nothing. That's not a job. So we all know that you need somebody that you can communicate with. That's a silly job description. Don't put it in there.
Yeah, and
Um,
like you said before, that means a million different things to a million different people.
yeah, yeah. And this is interesting. Somebody commented, Stacy commented, and I heard on a podcast that Black women may be penalized for having a 4-year degree. I have not heard that. I'm going to do research on that now. So I don't have a response at this moment. But do you, Sydney? Do you have a response to
Um,
that?
yes. So something that actually is sort of common is for marginalized people, especially Black women, to be interpreted the wrong way by having a very powerful mastery of a certain skill set.
What does that
And
mean? Interpreted? I'm asking for just clarification. Like when you say
oh,
interpreted the
sure,
wrong
sure,
way,
sure.
what does that mean?
A certain level of implicit bias in basically being afraid of a Black person that knows what their rights are, or
Oh,
knows what's
okay.
going on.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Ooh,
in the same way that like an HR person may be a little afraid of an employee that knows exactly what their rights are, the same is sort of true of like Black women, especially in more senior and corporate roles.
that's frightening. That's interesting. Okay. And I do know that, and I do know that there is a fear in the corporate. I've done some research on that. I had not ever tied it to a degree, but that's interesting. So now I am gonna kind of dive into that more. So as we wrap up, because we're at the end of the show, I could talk to you for like another 2 hours about this very easily, but we do have to give people back their day. So kind of in closure, when you're thinking about what to talk about at work versus not, what are some of your final tips about what should be talked about and what should be avoided?
Sure. So
you kind of hit it on the head real quick. I just want to say you kind of hit it on the head at the beginning of the show with the I don't know you like that. So repeat that and then dive into it if you could.
Yeah. So the easy one is, hey, I don't know you like that. Please don't put the burden on this other person to educate you. I know when you see online people saying it's not my job to educate you, they're not being mean. This is coming from a literal, pragmatic place of not every single Black person in the world, or every single woman, or every single queer person, etc., is going to have the time, the bandwidth, or the want, or even the ability to educate you, like quite literally. That is something you do have to take your own initiative on and do your own research. That said, this kind of thing is not especially difficult. I think there is a certain level of, especially if you're just looking at online discourse, of this kind of conversation being a scary thing to have, because, hey, if you get something very slightly wrong, oh, this person's going to flip out at you and yada, yada, yada. But that's generally not true. If you don't make a big deal about it, but also just make it an open environment to talk about it without overly focusing too much on it or making it awkward and weird, then you'll do great. For example, pronouns, very easy one. Instead of going, please tell me exactly what your pronouns are, and I'll make sure everyone has it. Nah, just respect people's pronouns, whatever they may be.
Please. As it comes up, yeah, just as they tell you, hey, by the way. And I've never heard somebody be a jerk about that. It's kind of like a friend of mine who happens to be a gay man. He would talk about that. He would talk about doing something on the weekend with his partner, and people would say, oh, or talk about being married, and people would say, oh, what does your wife do? And he'd say, my husband does yada yada, and they would apologize, and he'd say, why? You didn't know? It was like, now you do. It's okay. And it's the same thing with pronouns. I've not seen anybody be rude. It's just, unless you keep getting it wrong, then I see people get upset, which is understandable.
Exactly. Like most trans and non-binary people get like, hey, if you look, like a cis man, then someone may say he once in a while, but hey, just try. Just try. Don't shut out about it too much. And this is probably the most important thing to end it on. Be mindful of the framework you are acting in when having these discussions, and what you were discussing as the default perspective, and be mindful of for the people that this affects, this is not an extra thing. This is a default. Talking about women's rights isn't an extra thing on top of talking about people. It's a default thing to women. It's like I hear a lot in nerd circles. There are two types of ethnicities, or there are two types of genders, regular and political. And we say that in a tongue-in-cheek way, but yeah, that's how a lot of people go about it.
That's true.
People, and there are political people.
And it's so serious. And it's so interesting. And I've had a lot of people ask me, just say, hey, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with this group or this subject. And asking somebody who is in a position to know. In other words, like, this is somebody asking how to handle it at their company. So they asked somebody who works in talent acquisition and employee relations consulting, me in this particular case. I have other friends who do the same thing, that have people ask them. That's a person that you ask. Okay. Don't like go to Joe Schmo and ask them. Also, I think it's very important for everybody to remember that just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not real. For instance, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who is definitely not a racist human, or as unracist as I think people can possibly be. I think everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people have that kind of in there somewhere. But she actively tries. She does actively try not to be. And she honest to God, did not know that there was still a lot of discrimination against marginalized groups in hiring. Didn't know that. But why would she? She doesn't have employees. She doesn't work in this type of situation where she would. Her friends aren't shitty. So why would she have known that? But as soon as she heard that, she knew. So so when you hear people talking about something and you hear people talking about, I'm having this experience, don't shut them down just because you haven't seen it. Your reality is not the global reality.
Yeah, like
just remember that.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like people that are shitheads will hide the fact that they are shitheads. For example, if any of you in the audience are women, you can probably attest to gentlemen will hide from other gentlemen that they are shitheads and save that specifically for the women. That
Yes,
also
they do.
Other marginalized groups as well. And oh, I had a very good note to end this one on, but I think I lost.
But it's okay.
Oh, wait, I remember now. I'm sorry. Just because you don't necessarily understand an issue, that you don't have to understand something to be respectful of it and give space.
Yes, exactly. Like I cannot relate to what some of my Black friends go through. I can't, or any of them. I can't relate to it. I can't. I've not had that experience, but it's valid. And I listen to them and I try to understand what changes need to be made and that type of thing. And that's the best I think that you can do. You're not always going to understand on a personal level. You may not understand why a woman is look at me. I'm not a huge fan of abortion. People get that mistake because I'm super like pro Roe v. Wade. I'm like, yeah, no. As a human, I don't get it. I don't understand why a woman would want to do that. And I'm not talking about medical cases and all that, but where it's, I just don't want the baby. I don't understand that. I think I just don't grasp that in my brain, but I understand that not everything's about me. so I don't project my ethics, or not my ethics. That's not true. I don't project my experience onto others. And I think that that's an important distinction. Don't project your experience onto other people. Theirs is different. They have had different experiences than you. So I think our final note is the world doesn't revolve around you. It doesn't. True. And remember that. And don't don't make the norm your norm.
True. Like you don't need a degree in gender studies to understand this person is trans. They just, this person says, please call me Susan, please use she, her pronouns. You don't need to understand the entirety of this person's existence. They just ask, please call me Susan. I use she, her pronouns. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy, not a big deal at all. And if you have any questions about anything specific that you or your company are trying to deal with, please feel free to reach out to either of us. I know that we would be very happy to help you. If you want introductions to somebody specific, if you have some questions and you want to know who you can ask about something, even if we're not the right people, we will send you to the right people. We're both on LinkedIn. This is Sydney Ware. You can find him. He is also a connection of mine. Again, I am your host, Catherine McCord. Any final words, Sydney, that you just want to throw out there to the universe?
No. I think I got it out there.
You nailed it.
Lives matter. Trans rights. And spay and neuter your pets, I guess.
and maybe some bad humans. Maybe also spay and neuter them. Just going to throw that out there. And I did just do a post on how not to be stupid. So if you or someone is struggling with stupidity and being a shitty human, show them that post. It will help them. So on that, have a wonderful day. Welcome to season 3. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Bye.